Samsung has really been upping their laptop lineup lately. From the Galaxy Book S to the Galaxy Book Ion and Flex, they're making it clear that they're wanting to come back to the computer world and try and garner some of the brand recognition from their ever-popular phones into the new same-named Galaxy laptops. The latest one of these that I think is interesting is the new Samsung Galaxy Chromebook. And with a seemingly tight-knit collaboration with Google on it, it seems to me that they're not just trying to expand this improved lineup, but they're also trying to help Google elevate the idea of a Chromebook, period. But we'll talk about that more in a bit. Right now, I happen to have a Galaxy Chromebook that Samsung is letting me borrow to do a review, and I've been able to use it for a bit, albeit in my own apartment only since we're all in quarantine right now. But regardless, it's given me enough time, and I think I can do a complete walkthrough on it for you guys. Now, if you're not familiar, a complete walkthrough on this channel is where I try to go through every single feature I possibly can on a new device, so you guys are better prepared should you be in the market to actually go buy one. Now, with that said, there's a lot to go through. So, let's get started with the hardware. And speaking of that hardware, I just have to say, it feels so good. It's made out of aluminum and it just feels super solid. I mean, like, a lot more premium than the more expensive Galaxy Book Ion that I used, for example. It's also the thinnest Chromebook ever at just 9.9 millimeters thin, and that combined with the only 2.29 pounds that it weighs means it's a pretty easy to carry around machine. It comes in two colors, the gray that I have here and a Fiesta Red, which is like a candy apple red, a little bit of orange in it. I don't know. Frankly, that's the color I would get if it were me. But then again, I'm also a fan of brightly colored tech in general. Now, as for the screen, it has a 13.3-inch 4K AMOLED 16:9 display that is super bright. It's the same brightness as my Razer Blade 15-inch 4K OLED, for that matter. And it has bright colors and great contrast thanks to that OLED screen. Now, the bezels on the sides are about 3.9 millimeters, with the one at the top and the bottom in particular being a bit larger than that. Above that screen, we have a 1 megapixel webcam that can shoot in 720p, and it looks and sounds like this. Beneath the screen, we have our keyboard, which is clicky enough for me to type on comfortably and quickly, and doesn't make a ton of noise either. Also, unlike that Galaxy Book Ion, the keys are centered and where they should be, in my opinion. The only exception to this I noticed is that when using it, there's no delete key, just a backspace. This also kind of made me realize just how much I use that key while writing to delete things after the cursor. Who knew? But regardless, it's not a big deal. Just something I noticed, and you can always hold Alt and backspace to do the same function. The keyboard is also backlit, which is great, but you can't control the backlighting, at least not in any way that I could easily find while using this, so you'll just have to trust the laptop to determine when it's dark enough to turn them on or not. At the top right of this keyboard, we have a fingerprint sensor that lets you log into the device with your finger. Personally, this is my favorite way of logging into any laptop compared to the facial unlock that some Windows machines have, as that's just not as reliable for me. Now, beneath that keyboard though, we have our decently sized trackpad that works well even with Chrome OS's gestures, etc. Moving around the laptop, we have a USB-C port, a 3.5mm audio jack, and a volume rocker on the left. On the right, we have our power button, another USB-C port, and a micro SD card slot that also accepts Samsung's own proprietary UFS cards, which are the same size as micro SD cards, but they have up to a 500 megabytes a second read and 200 megabytes a second write speeds, compared to the 90 or so for the top model UHS Class 3 micro SD card. Now, these UFS cards cost about twice the price of the same sized micro SD card, at least where I could find them for sale, which I'll leave a link below if anyone's interested in those. Regardless of which you choose and whether you need that speed or not, it's a nice way to expand the 256 gig SSD that's inside. Also, on the right, we have a built-in pen. This clicks out and back in much the same way as the S Pen would from the Galaxy Note devices. This pen has 4,096 levels of pressure, and it can also detect tilt as well. Unlike the S Pen, there is no button on this pen, and no, the S Pen doesn't work on this screen and vice versa, trust me, I tried. So, what you see is what you get. Lastly, you might have noticed that there is an oddly pointing upward camera on the base of the laptop. Now, Samsung calls this a world-facing camera versus the front-facing one, and it's actually a clever idea. You see, the device is also a 2-in-1, so the hinge can go back a full 360 degrees. When you do that, that camera is now on the back, and all of a sudden, it makes a lot more sense. That camera, by the way, is an 8 megapixel camera that is capable of recording video in an odd 1200p, so 1600 by 1200 resolution. But I imagine the bigger use case for this is probably to take photos of, say, notes in class or a meeting, and then be able to just write on them using the pen. Also, It's worth noting that since this runs Chrome OS and can run Android apps, you can also use that camera along with any Android camera apps, like say Adobe Scan to scan documents, and then you can sign them, etc. Which is kind of cool, actually. All I ask is that you please don't take your vacation photos with it. Thanks. The 360-degree design is also good for using the pen, as even though you can use it in laptop form, any sketching like that gets tiresome after a certain amount of time, and it's just much more natural to use when flat. Now for audio, we have stereo speakers. Surprisingly, no mention of AKG, which is now owned by Samsung and tunes most of their higher-end audio devices. These are located on either side of the laptop, and they actually do a good job of aiming the sound at you. Inside the laptop, we have an Intel i5 10210U, a U-series 10th gen processor, which has better performance but will use more power than its Y-series counterparts that are often found in thinner laptops. Now, that is paired with 8 gigs of RAM and built-in Intel UHD 620 graphics. Now, that might not sound like a powerhouse, because, well, it's not, but since it's running Chrome OS, which is more for using the web browser and occasionally some Android apps, that's plenty for most of those things. I was even able to edit photos in Adobe Lightroom with the Android app, and had some slowdown here and there, but not to the point where it bothered me. Speaking of, here are some benchmarks for anyone that's curious to use them to compare it to another laptop or even a phone, depending on how many of those Android apps you're going to be using. Now for connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 6, which you can check out my decoder episode on for exactly what that means and the benefits of it at the link here. And we also have Bluetooth, although no mention of the version. I'm going to probably assume it's at least 5. Now for battery life, the laptop has a 47.9 watt-hour battery, and Samsung rated it at about 8.4 hours of runtime. But let's do an albeit unscientific test and see how well it does at 50%-ish brightness, streaming a YouTube video at 1080p. Now, it is capable of charging over USB-C, and here's how quickly it does that using Samsung's own charger. For software, we're running Chrome OS, and there isn't any added apps from Samsung at all, which is odd to me, but it feels very much like maybe Google was in charge of the software part of all this, and so it'll be very similar to any other Chromebook. Now, for those who aren't familiar though, let's quickly show some key points about Chrome OS in general. Navigating the OS is pretty simple. You have your dock, which you can swipe on or drag up on to then open your app drawer. Most of the pre-installed apps in here are really just shortcuts to the website that they correspond to, and they'll just open in Chrome, except when you install Android apps, for example. You also have a quick settings panel at the bottom right that you can click on to easily toggle the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, notifications on and off and do not disturb, nightlight, which helps you adjust the blue light filter, and if you have any devices on the same network that you can cast your screen to using Chromecast, that icon will also appear here as well. You also have sliders for volume and brightness, and a quick way to sign out, power options, lock the computer, and a gear icon to get to all of your settings. Now, next to that, we have a shortcut for some stylus tools that let you take a screenshot of a section of the screen, the entire screen, open a new note in Google Keep, a laser pointer so you can use it for presenting meetings while casting, or pretend to be a meteorologist, for example. And we also have a magnifying glass. Going into the settings really lets you see how much Google has aimed for simplicity with Chrome OS when you realize that there's just not much in here. And, well, really, there doesn't need to be. The idea really for a Chromebook is that it's meant to be used by someone who needs to use websites as their main tools, as is in the case for a lot of industries, honestly. And as such, it runs a full version of Chrome's web browser, not the Android equivalent that just has a desktop-like checkbox to try to load the desktop view, just a full-blown Chrome web browser. So anything you do on your Windows or Mac computer through Chrome or another desktop browser, you can do here just fine, including adding extensions to Chrome as well. Now, for anything that isn't in the browser, as I mentioned before, you can use the included Play Store to then download any Android app and use that like you would on, say, an Android tablet. You can also visit any web page in the Chrome browser and select More Tools, then Create Shortcut, and you can create a web app version of the page, which is something I like to do. Now, even though it functions basically the same as a web page, I have to admit it just feels and looks way better and more app-like. I don't know. And well, that's pretty much it. Simple, right? But if most of your work is done on the web or can be done, say, in like Google Docs, Sheets, etc., it's not much else that you need. The Galaxy Chromebook is available now, and it's $999. And yes, that is a lot for a Chromebook, I hear you saying, and you're not wrong. You can easily find other Chromebooks for cheaper with better battery life, and if really long battery life is the only thing you care about, you're better off saving a little bit and getting maybe a Pixelbook Go, for example, which is another Chromebook that I really like. But even if you spec that one with an i5, it's the Y model, not the U, so performance won't be the same, and 8 gigs of RAM, you'll be paying $849 for that with better battery life, sure, but no AMOLED screen, a very different feel and look, no pen, no 360 hinge, etc., etc., etc. Like everything in the tech world, there are trade-offs. Also, life. So again, I feel like this device is trying to sit where the Pixelbook did out of nowhere way back in 2017 as a premium Chromebook. And I think there's probably a demographic for that. If you care more about the experience of using something and those maybe harder to quantify things, then this is a good option to pay a little more for than another Chromebook. Also, again, I'd get the Red, just saying. My question to you guys though is that for $999, would you even get a Chromebook? There are other options out there. There's the new iPad Pro you can get with a keyboard. There's the new MacBook Air is about that price. Also, there's other Windows PCs. I mean, one that I just did a video on that I'll leave a link to below is also like the Galaxy Book S, also from Samsung, all around the same price. So which of those, and I'm sure it's gonna be different depending on your workflow in particular, but which of those would you choose? Let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you guys, honestly. Always appreciate it. If you did like this video though, please thumbs up it or share it. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and ding the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching.